Today, we're diving into a really powerful and honestly a pretty challenging argument that's happening inside the Uyghur community. It gets right to the heart of a very personal question. What is Islam's role in the fight for national survival?
And it all really boils down to this one single provocative question. When you're facing an existential threat, is focusing on your religious practice a help, or is it actually a hindrance? For a lot of people, there's no easy answer here. It cuts right to the core of their identity and their entire struggle.
So here's one side of the debate. Some people say the focus has to be, 100% on national liberation. They'll look back at the heroes of the past and say, look, what we need right now is a laser focus on the homeland, not getting bogged down in religious arguments. It's basically a call to put the national cause first above everything else.
But then there's this really compelling counter-argument that says, wait a minute, that's a false choice. The problem, according to this view, isn't faith itself, not at all. It's the kind of faith that's being practiced. The central claim here is that one type of faith actually leads to failure, while another, well, that one might just be the key to liberation.
Okay, so here's the key concept you need to understand. It's what the speaker calls buzuk etikad, which translates to corrupt faith. Now, this isn't about a faith that comes directly from reading the Quran. No, this is a faith based on traditions that are just passed down from your ancestors. It's about following what's always been done instead of actually going back to the source text for yourself.
And this is how the whole debate is framed. On one side, you've got this corrupt faith. It's based on tradition, it creates fake enemies inside the community, it causes division, and here's the punchline. It ultimately leads to failure. But on the other side, you have a Quranic faith. This one is based on scripture, and the argument is that it helps you identify the one true enemy, which in turn leads to unity, and then to liberation. Let's see how this idea actually plays out in history.
So for our first example, we've got to go back to the 1930s. It's the story of a revolutionary poet, a real rising star, whose movement was just cut short. And it's presented as this tragic case of what can happen when a movement gets sabotaged, not from the outside, but from within.
This young man, Abdul Khalik Igor, was inspiring a whole generation. He had serious momentum. But then, in 1933, everything was shattered. Religious traditionalists started calling him an unbeliever, a heretic, and this propaganda campaign was just devastatingly effective. His popular support completely evaporated, leaving him totally exposed and vulnerable to his enemies.
In this quote, this just perfectly illustrates the core of the argument. The claim is that it was this so-called corrupt faith, this internal division, that made his execution possible. The thinking goes, if the people had been united, if they had truly understood who the real enemy was, they would have protected their leader. They wouldn't have just abandoned him over accusations of heresy.
And, this wasn't just a one-off thing. The argument is that we see this exact same pattern repeat itself just over a decade later with the failure of the Second East Turkestan Republic.
So, in 1944, a new republic is declared. This was a huge moment of hope. But what happens, once again, a campaign of internal propaganda kicks off. The leaders get smeared as godless communists, as puppets of Russia. And this messaging was so effective that it basically cut off the revolution in the north from all the people in the south. It just completely prevented a unified national movement from ever taking hold.
And this really drives the point home. The nation wasn't split by an external enemy, but by internal religious arguments. By turning believers against the revolution's own leaders, this corrupt faith, according to this analysis, ended up doing the enemy's work for them. It ensured the republic would eventually just collapse.
Okay, so we've looked at these historical failures. The argument then pivots and asks, well, what about today? If a corrupt faith creates fake enemies and division, what does a true scripture-based faith actually do?
The answer that's presented is incredibly stark. It's totally unambiguous. A faith that's drawn directly from the Quran, the speaker claims, just clears away all the confusion. It gets rid of the noise and points to a single adversary. It makes the struggle simple by cutting out all the other distractions.
So what kind of distractions are we talking about? Well, it's the endless internal debates, right? The little squabbles over minor rituals, the arguments about who's a better Muslim. It's even creating enemies out of other Muslims, or even potential allies in the West. According to this view, these are all just symptoms of a faith that has completely lost its focus on the one primary existential threat.
So it all comes down to this number, 1. From this perspective, there is only one enemy that actually matters, the Chinese state. Any energy you spend fighting anyone else or arguing about anything else is just a diversion. It weakens the collective, and it only serves the interests of that one true opponent.
And this brings us to the final and I think most powerful conclusion of the whole argument. It's a complete reframing of the entire relationship between religious devotion and the struggle for freedom.
And there it is. That's the ultimate thesis. It completely resolves that initial conflict by just merging the two ideas. The argument is this. For a people that are literally facing extermination, the most profound act of faith, the most meaningful form of worship you can possibly engage in, is the fight to save your nation. They're not two separate duties, they're one and the same.
And so we end on this question. And it's really the central challenge being posed here. Because if you accept this premise, that the fight for the homeland is the highest form of worship, it forces you to completely reconsider your priorities. What actions then become the most sacred? What becomes the most urgent duty of all?